All right, this is Numbers 31 in the MacArthur Study Bible. A little refresher of 30. Basically, it was all about taking vows. So if a man takes a vow, then he's got to keep it. If a woman makes a vow to the Lord, but she's still in her father's house, she has to keep it unless her father overrules it. Or if she takes a husband, and the husband hears about it and makes no response to her on that day that he hears it, then her vow will stand. But if her husband does overrule her on the day that she made the vow and he heard about it, then the vow won't stand. And then a widow or a divorced woman, if she makes a vow, she'll have to keep it, basically. All right. Well, now in chapter 31, you get back to some narrative. And really, this is going to be like a continuation of what happened in chapter 25. And I've talked a little bit about 31 before. So now, the Midianites, they caused the Israelites to fall into idolatry in chapter 25, and there was judgment. Well, now God is going to have the Israelites judge the Midianites for that sin, for causing Israel to sin. All right, well, start with the first 11 verses. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Take vengeance on the Midianites, the children of Israel. Afterward you shall be gathered to your people. And so Moses spoke to the people, saying, Arm some of yourselves for war, and let them go against the Midianites to take vengeance for the Lord on Midian. 1,000 from each tribe of all the tribes of Israel you shall send to war. So there were recruited from the divisions of Israel 1,000 from each tribe, 12,000 armed for war. Moses sent them to war, 1,000 from each tribe. He sent them to war with Phinehas, the son of Eleazar the priest, with the holy articles and the signal trumpets in his hand, and they warred against the Midianites just as the Lord commanded Moses. They killed all the males. They killed the kings of Midian with the rest of those who were killed, Evi and Rechem and Zur and Hur and Reba and the five kings of Midian, and Balaam the son of Beor they also killed with the sword. And the children of Israel took the women of Midian captive with their little ones, and they took as their spoil all their cattle and all their flocks and all their goods, and they also burned with fire all the cities where they dwelt, all their forts, and they took all the spoil and all the booty of man and beast. Okay, so here's a summary basically of this whole chapter. Well, I just read the first 11 verses, but here's the summary of the whole chapter. This chapter has many links with the previous passages in Numbers. Vengeance on Midian, and Zur the Midianite, and Balaam, Peor, purification after contact with the dead, care for the priests and Levites. And this battle with the Midianites modeled God's requirements for holy war when Israel took vengeance on his enemies. And this is not genocide, this is sinocide. And this is actually one of the reasons, well, of course, it's when the conquest happens, but one of the reasons people don't like the Bible is because of these killings that happen here. Yeah, but it's judgment on for sin. And it's not, arbitrary. Yeah, well, the reason they're getting vengeance on the Midianites is because what the Midianites did in chapter 25. They led Israel to sin. Yeah, and brought God's judgment upon the Israelites. But since the Midianites were responsible for causing that, then now they're going to be judged. Yep. All right. So verses 1 through 11, Israel was commanded by the Lord to take vengeance on Midian because they were responsible for corrupting the people of Israel at Peor in 25. Yep. And so God tells Moses to take vengeance on the Midianites for the children of Israel. And then afterwards you shall be gathered to your people. Gathered to your people. It's basically just a euphemism for death. That after this happens, then Moses would die. So I guess really after this happens, probably it's right towards the very end of the wilderness wanderings. So maybe whenever these other laws that were given or reiterated that I previously read in those other chapters, maybe even Deuteronomy was already, told and written eventually to this new generation. Yeah, maybe so. So, again, not everything's lined up in chronological order, so. But anyway, so they go to war against the Midianites. You got 1,000 from each of the 12 tribes, so 12,000 people. And then they take out the men, and they take out 5 kings of Midian, Evi, however you say that, Rechem and Zur, Hur, and Reba. Yep, and I think that woman who committed the sexual immorality with that one Israelite in Numbers 25, let me see, I think she was actually of Zur. Yeah, the Midianite woman who was killed in Numbers 25, Cosby, she was the daughter of Zur. So Zur is one of the 5 kings of Midian. Yeah, but he gets taken out in this battle. Yep, and then the Israelites take the women and the children captive. And then, of course, the livestock and all that. But, of course, I think I remember one of the commandments, you take women captive, you got to give them a month to mourn or whatever. And don't have sex with them or whatever. And then afterwards you can take them as your wife or whatever. Yeah. So, well, I know probably some today would see that as wrong and all that. Yeah, but I think that still shows care even for a woman. At least giving her time to grieve, I guess. So, yep. All right, now you have all of that happen, and now they return from war. Verses 12 through 24. And then they brought the captives, the booty, and the spoil to Moses, and to Eleazar the priest, and to the congregation of the children of Israel, to the camp in the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho. And then Moses, Eleazar the priest, and all the leaders of the congregation went out to meet with them outside the camp. And Moses is actually pretty angry with the officers of the army, and also with the captains over thousands and captains over hundreds who came back from battle. Moses is like, "Have you kept these women alive? Look, these women caused the children of Israel, through the counsel of Balaam, to trespass against the Lord in the incident of Peor, and there was a plague among the congregation of Israel. Now therefore, kill every male along with the little ones, and every woman who has known a man intimately. But keep alive for yourselves all the young girls who have not known a man intimately. And as for you, remain outside the camp for 7 days, whoever has killed any person, and whoever has touched any slain, purify yourselves and your captives on the 3rd day, and on the 7th day. Purify every garment, everything made of leather, every woven of goat's hair, and everything made of wood." And then Eleazar the priest said to the men of war who had gone to battle, This is an ordinance of the law which God commanded Moses. Only the gold and the silver and the bronze, the iron, the tin, and the lead, everything that can endure fire, you shall put through the fire, and it shall be clean. It shall be purified with the water of purification. But all that cannot endure fire, you shall put through water. And you shall wash your clothes on the seventh day, and be clean, and afterward you may come into the camp. So basically all of the Midianites except virgin women were to be put to death. And both the soldiers and the spoil also needed to be cleansed. And the execution of all male children and the women of childbearing age, they ensured the extermination of the Midianites, and they prevented them from ever again seducing Israel to sin. And that's why you had the judgment. They seduced Israel into sin. Reference to Midianites later in Judges 6, it was to a different clan. It was the Midianites living in Moab here who were destroyed. Okay. So these are the Midianites living in Moab. These are the ones that get destroyed here. Yeah. And so they had to, purify all of their spoil and all that. And of course, they killed people. They were, of course, around dead bodies and all that when taking out people in war. So they were ceremonially unclean. So they had to stay outside the camp for 7 days. Yep, they had to purify their garments and all of the stuff. Yep, and then after 7 days, they could be let back into the camp. And anything that could be, endure the fire, then they can put some of that gold and metal, bronze or whatever, anything that can go through the fire, put it through the fire and it'll be clean. But anything that cannot endure fire can be purified with the water. Okay. So, yeah, how come, they took out some of the women, but not like the virgin? Well, I guess the women who had sex, I guess by taking them out, it would probably help maybe ensure that maybe, they couldn't get enticed, hopefully again. And maybe with these young virgin women that were kept alive, maybe they could hopefully assimilate. So, I don't know. Yeah. Again, it's just a matter of keeping God's people pure from sin and making sure, no one can cause them to sin. Yeah. And that was the case. It was judgment for causing God's people to sin. And it was those Midianite women especially who did it. So they were taken out. Yep. All right. And also, we noticed whenever Moses was talking to the men, he actually mentioned Balaam. These women caused the children of Israel through the counsel of Balaam to trespass against the Lord in the incident of Peor. And then there was a plague among the congregation of the Lord. Yeah. So really it's in this chapter, and I mentioned this before, that actually says that even Balaam was responsible for what happened in chapter 25. Yeah, he counseled those Midianite women to go and seduce the Israelite men into sin, and that's what happened. And it led to the plague breaking out, and he had 24,000 or so, die. Yep. Yep. And I know I've referenced this before, but in Jude verse 11, talking about false teachers, they have run greedily in the error of Balaam for profit. Yep. Yeah. And for a large financial reward, Balaam devised a plan for Balak, king of Moab, to entice Israel into a compromising situation with idolatry and immorality, which would bring God's own judgment on his people. Yep, and that's what he did. And in battle, he was killed as well. Yeah, those kings were taken out, and so was Balaam. Yep. Yep, was it really worth it? And to try to get that money, dude? You couldn't curse the people with your words, but you did it with your actions. Yep, and did it by helping to set all that up. Yep. And yet you said you wanted to die in the death of the righteous. Well, that is not what happened. Yep. Yep, not worth it, man. Not worth it. Okay, so now you get to verses 25 through the rest of the chapter 54. Okay. So now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Count up the plunder that was taken of man and beast, you and Eleazar the priest, and the chief fathers of the congregation, and divide the plunder into 2 parts, between those who took part in the war, who went out into battle, and all the congregation. I guess the rest of the congregation that didn't go out into battle. And levy a tribute for the Lord on the men of war who went out to battle. 1 of every 500 of the persons, the cattle, the donkeys, the sheep, take it from their half and give it to Eleazar the priest as a heave offering to the Lord. And from the children of Israel's half, you shall take 1 of every 50 drawn from the persons, the cattle, the donkeys, the sheep, from all the livestock, and give them to the Levites, who kept charge of the tabernacle of the Lord. And so Moses and Eleazar the priest did as the Lord commanded Moses. So the booty remaining for the plunder which the men of war had taken was 675,000 sheep. 675,000 sheep. 72,000 cattle, 61,000 donkeys, and 32,000 persons in all, of women who have not known a man intimately. And the half, the portion for those who had gone out to war, was in the number 337,000. 337,500 sheep. So, of course, half of 675. Yep. And also, the Lord's tribute of the sheep was 675. Yep, 675. And the cattle were 36,000, of which the Lord's tribute was 72. And the donkeys were 30,500, which the Lord's was 61. And the persons were 16,000, of which the Lord's tribute was 32 persons. And so the Lord gave the tribute, which was the Lord's heave offering, to Eleazar the priest, as the Lord commanded Moses. And from the children of Israel's half, which Moses separated from the men who fought, now the half belonging to the congregation was 337,500 sheep, and 36,000 cattle, and 30,500 donkeys, and 16,000 persons. And from the children of Israel's half, Moses took one of every 50 drawn from man and beast, and gave them to the Levites, who kept charge of the tabernacle of the Lord, as the Lord commanded Moses. And then the officers who were over thousands of the army, the captains of thousands and the captains of hundreds, came near to Moses, and they said to Moses, Your servants have taken account of the men who were under our command, and not a man of us is missing. And therefore we have brought an offering for the Lord, what every man found of ornaments of gold, armlets and bracelets and signet rings and earrings and necklaces to make atonement for ourselves before the Lord. And so Moses and Eleazar the priest received the gold from them, all the fashioned ornaments and all the gold of the offering that they had offered to the Lord from the captains of thousands and captains of hundreds. And they had a total of 16,750 shekels. The men of war had taken spoil, every man for himself, and Moses and Eleazar received the gold from the captains of thousands and of hundreds and brought it into the tabernacle of meeting as a memorial for the children of Israel before the Lord. So basically what you have going on here is the plunder that the men got in battle. It was divided equally between those who fought and those who stayed, basically. I might read a little bit again. So basically, a levy of tribute before the Lord on the men of war who went out to battle. You would have one of every 500 persons, the cattle and the donkeys and the sheep, take it from their half and then give it to Eleazar the priest as a heave offering. And of the children of Israel's half, take one of every 50 drawn from the persons, cattle, donkeys, sheep from the livestock, give them to the Levites. So the booty basically remaining from the plunder was 675,000 sheep and 72,000 cattle, and then 61,000 donkeys and 32,000 persons of all of the women who had not known a man. And the half of the portion of that stuff that would go to the men of war. So you would have the 337,500 sheep for those men, and then the Lord's tribute of sheep, 600, and the Lord's tribute of the sheep was 675,000. So of course half for the men who went, and then of course the other half for the rest of the congregation. And then of course the cattle. So cattle, of course, for the men would be, cattle were 36,000, even though the whole thing 72. So Lord's tribute 72,000. So all of that, but of course the half going to the men there. And then the persons, of course, the ladies who were left over, that would go to these men, 16,000. And of course, originally, 32,000. So 16,000. So half. The half of the children of Israel, of course. That's what, same thing. All right, and then also from the children of Israel's half, Moses took one of every 50 for man and beast. So taking one of every 50 from the children of Israel's half of the booty that they got, and then it would, be given to the Levites, basically. That's what you got. And then also you have the ornaments and the ornaments of gold, armlets and bracelets and signet rings, earrings, necklaces, make atonement for themselves and before the Lord. So those get, and taken all the gold of the offering that they offered to the Lord from the captains of thousands, captains of hundreds. Basically all that gold that captains gave to Moses and Eleazar or whatever, to make an offering to the Lord. The shackles of all of that were 16,750 shekels. Yeah, sorry, shekels, not shackles. Yep. Yep. So Moses, Eleazar the priest, they received the gold. They brought it to the Lord in the tabernacle. Yep, as a memorial for the children of Israel before the Lord. Okay, well, that's actually the end of Numbers 31. Yep, they went to battle. Yep, took out the Midianites. Yep, and they returned. Yeah, they returned, but they had, of course, they had to stay outside the camp, purify themselves after battle, wash their garments and other belongings, keep the virgin women alive. Yep, and then, of course, the plunder would be divided up with the men of war, and the rest of the congregation of Israel. And then that half for the children of Israel would, some of that, of course, one of 50, of course, that would go to Moses, and be given to the Levites, basically. All right. Well, that's the end of that. But probably the big lesson is, in this chapter also, is, you better not cause, God's people to sin. Because there will be, judgment on those who would lead his own people into sin. Yep. And of course, Balaam learned that, the hard way, unfortunately. Yep. Yep. And of course, Jesus said in the New Testament, it's better if you have a millstone tied around your neck than you cause one of these little ones, of course, children who believe in me, to stumble. Yep. And that's exactly what happened. Yep. And there was judgment for it. And it would have been better if they would have had millstones tied around their necks. It would have been better if Balaam would have had that than what he got. Yep, or what they ultimately got now. Yep. Well, Lord willing, I guess I'll get to chapter 31 in Prager's Rational Bible next time. But until then, may God bless you, and the grace and mercy won by Jesus, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all.